What happens on a 17-year-old's first day of work 150 feet underground inside a nuclear missile silo? I went looking for the answer in the Air Force Aerospace Safety Investigation Report for Titan II Launch Complex 3734 near Searcy, Arkansas. And what I found was not a technical failure in the way I expected. It was a boy named Gary Lay who had woken up that morning, driven to his first day on a construction job inside a hole in the ground that held a fueled intercontinental ballistic missile, and by the end of the afternoon was lying in a hospital bed with second and third degree burns across his body, one of his hands burned to a crisp, while 53 men who had gone down into the same hole that morning were being carried out in body bags over the next 16 hours. Lay was one of 55 civilian workers inside the silo on August 9, 1965. He was 17 years old. It was his first day. He was cleaning up debris on level 2, the second underground floor of a 9-story concrete tube sunk 150 feet into the earth, when a ball of fire blazed up the launch duct from below. The lights went out. The silo went completely dark. Every man around him started shouting, "Let's get out of here." Lay's first instinct was the same as everyone else's. He tried to reach the ladder, but the ladder was already jammed with men climbing over each other in the dark, in the smoke, in the heat. He could not get on it, so he turned the other direction and fought his way through the flames toward the cableway on level 2, a passageway that connected the launch duct to the underground launch control center. The smoke was thick enough that he could not see his hands in front of his face. He made it through. He reached the control center. He survived. Hubert Saunders, 59 years old, reached the same passageway by a different route. He suffered severe smoke inhalation. He survived. They were the only 2 of 55 men working in the silo to come out alive. The other 53 did not reach the passageway. They did not reach the surface. They did not reach anything. Most of them climbed toward the only exit they knew, which was a single vertical ladder running up the interior of the launch duct. A concrete tube 9 stories tall, with the missile occupying the center and the workers occupying the narrow, annular space between the missile's skin and the concrete wall. The ladder was the only way up. The elevator, which ran alongside the ladder, had no independent power source. When the fire cut the main electrical supply to the silo, the elevator stopped wherever it happened to be and stayed there, useless, a metal box hanging in a shaft full of smoke. The 700-ton steel and concrete silo door at the top of the launch duct could not be opened without power. The door was designed to withstand a Soviet nuclear blast. It was not designed to be opened by 53 men trying to escape a fire with no electricity. The lighting system went dark with the power. The emergency lighting was not strong enough to penetrate the thick black smoke pouring from the burning hydraulic fluid. The face masks that each worker had been issued were designed to protect against rocket propellant fumes in the event of a fuel spill. They offered no filtration against the carbon monoxide and combustion products of a petroleum-based hydraulic fire. The men put them on. The masks did nothing. 52 of the 53 who died were asphyxiated. The fire consumed the oxygen in the sealed concrete tube faster than any ventilation system could have replaced it. And the ventilation system was not fully operational anyway because the blast valves that controlled the airflow through the launch duct had been partially removed as part of the renovation work the men were there to perform. The 53rd man drowned in hydraulic fluid that had pooled on one of the lower levels. 2 men climbing the ladder in the dark, and the smoke reached a narrow section of the ladderway and wedged themselves together so tightly that neither could move. They blocked the ladder. Everyone below them was trapped. The men on the ladder below the blockage could not climb past them. The men on the levels below the ladder could not reach it. They died where they were. Some pressed themselves against the walls. Some tried to crawl into air conditioning ducts. Some simply stopped moving when the oxygen ran out. Investigators later mapped the body locations by level, though not by name. 12 on level 2, 24 on level 3, where the fire started, 8 on level 4, 1 on level 5, 4 each on levels 6 and 7. The distribution tells you everything about the escape attempt. The men closest to the fire died immediately. The men further down tried to climb. Most of them made it no higher than level 3 before the smoke and the heat and the lack of oxygen stopped them. No record was made of which man was found on which level. The investigation noted this as a deficiency, but it was never corrected. The families of the dead were told their people had died in the silo. They were not told where in the silo, or in what position, or facing which direction. The information that might have told a wife whether her husband had been climbing toward the light or had stopped moving where he stood was not written down by anyone. Titan II. The Launch Complex 3734 was one of 18 Titan II nuclear missile sites in Arkansas, operated by the 308th Strategic Missile Wing out of Little Rock Air Force Base in Jacksonville. The silo sat 11 miles north of Searcy in White County in the Ozark foothills, nestled among blackjack oaks and hayfields on a plot of land that looked, from above, like every other piece of rural Arkansas. You would not know, driving past on the county road, that beneath the surface was a concrete tube containing a missile capable of destroying a city. The silo had been completed on July 31st, 1962, the first of the 308th Strategic Missile Wing's 18 sites to be finished. It went on alert on May 16, 1963, meaning it was fully operational, fueled, armed, and ready to launch a thermonuclear weapon at a target in the Soviet Union on presidential order. The missile was a Titan II, the largest ICBM ever built in the United States. It stood over 100 feet tall, was 10 feet in diameter, and weighed 135 tons. Its warhead carried a yield of 9 megatons, approximately 600 times the destructive power of the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. It could reach targets 9,000 miles away. It sat in its tube, fueled with Aerozine 50, a hypergolic fuel that ignites spontaneously on contact with its oxidizer nitrogen tetroxide, meaning no spark is required to start the engine. The propellants touch each other and they burn. That is the missile the civilian construction workers were standing next to every day for weeks, in a narrow space between its skin and the concrete wall, wielding welding torches and grinders and cutting tools. The missile was designed to end a city. The silo was designed to protect the missile from a Soviet nuclear attack. The men inside the silo were there to make it stronger. Nobody had designed the silo to protect the men. In the summer of 1965, the Air Force initiated Project Yard Fence, a program to harden the Titan II sites against Soviet nuclear attack. Civilian contractors, employed by Peter Kiewitt's Sons of Omaha and Newbury Electric Corporation, were brought in to reinforce the silo walls, upgrade the exhaust and plumbing systems, and strengthen the facilities against blast, radiation, and electromagnetic pulse. For the duration of the work, the warhead had been removed and stored at Little Rock Air Force Base, but the missile stayed. The fuel stayed. Aerozine 50 was in the tank. The nitrogen tetroxide was in the oxidizer tank. The contractors were working inside a concrete tube that still contained a fueled intercontinental ballistic missile. The warhead was gone. The bomb that could destroy a city was in storage 55 miles away. But the fuel that could destroy the silo and everyone in it was right there, in the tanks, 10 feet from the men welding stiffener plates to the wall. The men who descended into the silo each morning were not military personnel. They were civilians, carpenters, electricians, welders, ironworkers, laborers. They ranged in age from 17 to 69. Most of them lived in Searcy or in surrounding towns. They drove to work, passed through the security checkpoint, descended into the silo by elevator or ladder, and spent the day doing the same kind of construction work they would have done on any job site in Arkansas. Framing, wiring, welding, pouring. The tools were the same. The skills were the same. The difference was that the job site was 150 feet underground, the air was recirculated, the lighting was artificial, the ventilation was partially dismantled, and the structure they were working inside contained enough hypergolic propellant to turn the concrete tube into an inferno if anything went wrong. The safety briefings told them about propellant hazards. The face masks were for propellant leaks. The protocols were for propellant spills. Nobody briefed them on what to do if a fire started from burning hydraulic fluid in a sealed tube with one ladder and no power. I need to explain why the ventilation matters, because it is the same detail that appears in every industrial disaster on this channel. The machine that was supposed to keep the men alive was not running when they needed it. The blast valves in the silo controlled the airflow through the launch duct. In normal operation, the silo's environmental control system circulated air through the tube, maintaining temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition at levels that kept the missile's propellant stable and the air breathable for the crew. During the yard fence modifications, the blast valves had been partially removed or repositioned as part of the upgrade work. The ventilation system was compromised. Air was not moving through the launch duct at the rate or in the pattern that the original design intended. The system that would have cleared smoke, that would have provided breathable air during a fire, that would have given the men additional minutes to reach the ladder or the passageway, was not fully functional because the construction project itself had taken it apart. The same pattern, the same calculation. Fraterville, where a ventilation furnace was turned off to save fuel. Donora, where the zinc works operated through a temperature inversion. Wooden passenger cars that nobody replaced with steel. The system designed to protect human life, compromised by the economics, the logistics, or the schedule of the work that was supposed to make everything safer. On August 9th, 1965, at approximately 1:10 in the afternoon, the fire started. The official investigation concluded that a welder on level 3, attaching a stiffener plate at an awkward angle in the cramped space between the missile and the silo wall, accidentally struck a high-pressure hydraulic hose with his welding rod. The rod melted through the hose wall and ignited the petroleum-based hydraulic fluid inside. The fluid sprayed under pressure, atomized, and ignited in a fan of flame that engulfed level 3 within seconds. The two survivors, Lay and Saunders, disputed this finding. Both stated that no welding was underway at the time the fire broke out. The investigation was conducted by the Air Force. The dead were civilians. The discrepancy was noted in the record, but never resolved. Whatever the ignition source, the result was the same. A petroleum-based fire in a sealed concrete tube with compromised ventilation, no emergency lighting, no backup power for the elevator, one escape ladder, and 55 men distributed across 9 underground levels. This is one silo, one hydraulic line, one afternoon in the Ozark foothills where 53 men went underground to strengthen a concrete tube against a Soviet nuclear weapon and died because the machine that was built to survive the end of the world could not protect the civilians working inside it from a fire. Subscribe if you want to see what else is buried in the records. On the surface, the response unfolded with military precision and civilian helplessness simultaneously. Technical Sergeant Donald Yunt called the Wing Command Post at 1:10 in the morning. Master Sergeant Ronald Wallace and Airman First Class. Donald Hastings put on air packs and descended to Level 2 at 1:16 in the morning. They reported extreme heat and dense smoke, no visible flames. They retreated. At 2:07 in the morning, Colonel Charles Sullivan, commanding the 308th Strategic Missile Wing, requested a physical count of personnel. 53 were unaccounted for. Firefighters were dispatched from the main base by helicopter at 2:11 in the morning. Medical vehicles followed by road. At 6 in the evening, the missile combat crew attempted to open the 700-ton silo closure door to ventilate the launch duct. The door would not open. There was not enough power. The men inside the tube had been without breathable air for nearly 5 hours. At 7:15 in the evening, a rescue team reached Level 5. No survivors. They returned for air. At 8:30 in the evening, they reached Level 8. No survivors. At 10:40 in the evening, the Strategic Air Command Disaster Control Center confirmed 53 fatalities, and 2 survivors were hospitalized. The last body was removed from the silo at 5:30 in the morning on August 10, 16 hours after the fire started. While the recovery was underway, the Air Force was managing a second crisis. When the power failed, the air conditioning went off, and the temperature inside the launch duct began to climb. The Titan II oxidizer, nitrogen tetroxide, has a boiling point of approximately 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If the silo temperature rose above that threshold, the oxidizer could begin boiling inside its pressurized tank. The pressure could rupture the tank wall. The oxidizer could contact the Aerozine 50 fuel. The propellants are hypergolic. They ignite on contact. The resulting explosion would have been catastrophic. At 10 p.m., the temperature in the launch duct hit 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees above the oxidizer's boiling point. Then, as the night air cooled the concrete walls through conduction, the temperature began to fall, the oxidizer held, the tanks held, the missile did not explode. That missile, serial number 620006, would be removed from the silo inspected, repaired, and reinstalled in another Titan II launch complex in Arkansas. On September 18th, 1980, 15 years after it was present in the silo that killed 53 men at Searcy, the same missile was involved in the Damascus Titan missile explosion. A maintenance airman dropped a wrench socket from a platform high inside the silo. The socket fell several stories, bounced, and punctured the missile's fuel tank. Aerosine 50 began leaking. Hours later, the fuel vapors ignited. The resulting explosion destroyed the silo entirely, blew the 700-ton silo door hundreds of feet into the air, threw twisted metal across the countryside, and ejected the 9-megaton nuclear warhead into a ditch beside a county road. The warhead did not detonate. Arkansas was, in the words of one engineer who worked on the program, very lucky that day. The same missile, serial number 620006, 2 disasters, 53 dead at Searcy, 1 dead at Damascus, 54 men killed by or in the presence of the same machine, a weapon designed to destroy a city on the other side of the planet. The men it actually killed were Americans in Arkansas who were standing too close to it with the wrong tools and the wrong conditions. Jason Ulsberger is a sociology professor at Arkansas Tech University. His grandfather was one of the 53 men who died inside the Searcy silo on August 9, 1965. In 2022, he published a book called The 53: Rituals, Grief, and a Titan II Missile Disaster. He interviewed 20 family members, most of them the children of the dead. He found that the disaster contaminated family relationships across generations. The grief did not end at the funerals. It metastasized. Children who lost fathers at ages 6, 8, or 10 grew into adults who could not speak about what happened, who carried the absence the way a wound carries an infection, who passed that silence to their own children without understanding that silence is its own kind of inheritance. Gary Lay said something years later that I found in a THV-11 news report from Arkansas, and I've not been able to set it down since I read it. 53 men are dead. 53 men that woke up that morning and kissed their wives goodbye, patted their children on the head, and went to work and never came home. The silo was refurbished after the fire. The damage from the fire itself was described in the investigation as minor. The missile was undamaged. Complex 373-4 was repaired, returned to operational status, and continued to hold a fueled, armed Titan II on alert, ready to launch until the Titan II program was decommissioned in February 1987. The silo that killed 53 men continued to function as a nuclear weapons platform for 22 more years. The concrete held. The missile sat in its tube. The fuel sat in its tanks. The warhead, reinstalled after the yard fence work was completed, sat at the top of the missile, and the silo operated as though 53 men had not died inside it on an August afternoon in 1965. In 1986, a granite monument to the 53 victims was dedicated at Little Rock Air Force Base. Today it stands at the Jacksonville Museum of Military History. A smaller marker and historical plaque stand at the corner of Dewey and Snowden Road near Highway 16 between Pangburn and Searcy. The silo site itself is on private land, sealed, capped, fenced. The blackjack oaks grow around the perimeter. The hayfields run up to the fence line. From the county road, you cannot see anything that tells you 53 men died 150 feet below the surface on a Monday afternoon, because a tool touched a hose in a concrete tube that had one ladder and no backup power and a fueled nuclear missile sitting in the center of it. Photographs from the night of August 9th show family members standing at the surface of the launch complex, waiting behind the perimeter for men who would never come up. The photographs do not show faces clearly. They show shapes in the dark, standing, waiting, lit by headlights and emergency lights, looking toward a hole in the ground where their husbands and fathers and sons had gone that morning. I started with a boy named Gary Lay, 17 years old. First day on the job, he went down into a hole in the ground that held a nuclear weapon, and within hours he was in a hospital bed with burns on his body, and 53 men he had barely met were dead in the tube below him. The silo was engineered to survive the end of the world. It could not save 53 carpenters and electricians and welders and laborers from Searcy, Arkansas, who went to work on a Monday morning and did not come home. America wasn't built in boardrooms. It was built in the dark, inside furnaces under 40-ton weights, and sometimes 150 feet underground in a missile silo in the Ozark foothills, where the concrete was thick enough to survive a nuclear blast, and the only way out was a single ladder in the dark with the smoke and the heat, and the men who needed it most never reached it. There are more of these stories. More machines, more furnaces, more men who went into the dark and came out different, or did not come out at all. Subscribe if you want to see what I pull from the records next. If you want to see how a powder press on the Brandywine killed 34 people and the company rebuilt it in the same spot because the water intake was too expensive to move, that video is on screen now.